podcast is brought to you by the Association for Coaching, the world's leading international professional body, which is advancing coaching in business and society worldwide. I'm Mark Crossfield, your host of this new series, where we introduce you to experts, coaches, and thought leaders who share their passion for career coaching. Our aim is to provide a comprehensive and informative resource for career coaches at all stages of their careers, offering valuable insights and practical advice from experienced professionals in the industry. Each week, I meet with a coaching expert and we explore an important aspect of career coaching. Hello and welcome to another episode exploring the world of career coaching. In today's conversation, my guest is Kate Trafford, and we're talking about how career coaches can better understand their clients' values, goals and motivations. Kate is a master coach, author and TEDx speaker who focuses on helping her clients to release the struggle and enjoy the journey towards authentic and sustainable success. Kate's coaching approach revolves around identifying her client's zone of genius, the unique combination of strengths, skills, motivations, passions, and experiences that they bring to their work when they're at their best. So, let's meet Kate Trafford. Welcome to the podcast, Kate.
Thanks, Mark. It's really great to be here.
Great to have you. And today we're discussing how career coaches can better understand their clients, particularly their values, goals, and motivations. Why is this important, Kate?
Oh, well, I think it's crucially important, Mark. I mean, quite often when we embark on a coaching relationship, at first there's certain things that are clear and other things that are not clear. Maybe the client comes in with a clear goal, but they haven't really thought through what the underlying motives for that are. And that's where we can play a really important role and make sure that the goal is actually theirs and not just something that they've been conditioned to pursue or trained to want. Similarly, they may not have a clear goal, and that's part of why they're inviting a coach into their lives. And so they might know that they're feeling demotivated, dissatisfied, their work is not as joyful or as meaningful as they'd like it to be, but they don't actually know what they want next. And in either case, I think that as coaches, we have a wonderful role to play in facilitating that thinking.
Yeah, that understanding is vital, isn't it, to kick things off. So what are some of the first things you do in your coaching process to gain a better understanding of your clients?
Well, my coaching process almost always begins with a discovery call. I know some coaches think that's a superfluous step, but for me, it's invaluable before any kind of commitment is made either way, that we kind of get to know each other a little bit and explore what the client would like to get from the coaching experience, not least because I have a small, carefully curated cluster of coaching colleagues. So if I'm talking to somebody and I think, I could help you with this, but I know somebody who would be an even better fit for you, I personally would always prefer to refer and make sure they get the best possible fit. But also, I think we're in that discovery call where you're getting to know somebody and what it is that they're looking for, why they're thinking about coaching at this moment in their lives. What you also have the chance to listen for beyond just the content that they offer you is actually how they tell the story. What do they emphasize and what recedes into the background, which gives you an initial sense of their current priorities. You can listen for values being leaked, if you like, in terms of themes that come through over and over again. You can listen for their motivation direction. Do they tend to make a change more because they're unhappy with what they've got or because they see a shiny new possibility going forward? And all of that is an invaluable input once the coaching relationship actually begins. So I always start with a discovery call.
Yeah, I do as well, actually. And I think one of the good things about that is you can start to have a conversation about what the goals are for the career, but also start to think about what the goals are for the coaching. And I think those are two different things, aren't they?
They absolutely they are. And one of my favorite questions to ask it is actually a question that begins to elicit both, right? Then you can kind of specialize and go a bit more granular from there. But I always ask my clients, how will you know that we've been successful? Right. So if we do this work and you look back at the end and you go, wow, that's the best investment ever. I'm so glad I made that decision. Then what's true for you at the end of our work and beyond that's perhaps not completely true for you now? And sometimes the answer that comes out is what they want in their career, what they want in their life. So you get that overarching outcome that comes through. But sometimes what they're saying is what they need from you as their coach, right? What the emphasis is. And so once that information comes out, once they answer my question, how will you know that we've been successful? Then whichever one they've really covered, I can then move to the other and help to flesh that out by asking some more specific questions, I guess.
Yeah, that's a great way of eliciting that the response that you're looking for there, isn't it? I really like that, actually.
Just to add there, Mark, I think it's really important to do that very early, like discovery call early, because also what that allows you to do is to give an indication of scope, right? If somebody says to you, I want, all of these things and I can afford 2 hours, then they may have a little bit of work to do to manage their expectations. And if their budget is that they can afford only 2 or 3 hours, then of course you get into a conversation about priorities. What are the most important outcomes for them? But as I say, you can actually make a recommendation, an initial assessment of scope. And I think that can be very helpful in terms of being on the same page about how you're going to work together and what those outcomes are likely to be.
Yeah, thank you. Hey, can you share an example of a time when a client experienced a breakthrough in the clarity during the coaching process with you and describe what impact this has had on their career? I think that'd be useful in terms of thinking about this episode, the context of this.
Well, I think that quite often what I noticed early in my coaching career, and as you know, Mark, I don't really describe myself as a career coach. My emphasis is more about authentic success overall in life and in work and in the role you're in right now, how to make the very best of the role that you're in right now. But in terms of the career trajectory aspect of coaching, I think one of the things I noticed fairly early on is that people bring challenges and issues and goals and opportunities that are often outside focus. They're externally focused. So I want to secure a promotion, or I'm considering launching my own business. I'm not sure how to go about that. Or I'm working for this boss and we don't get on and it's time for me to move on. So the emphasis is on the outside, but those real aha moments, those breakthrough moments tend to come on the back of a shift to focusing more on the inside. So it's the self-discovery piece, right? Who am I? Particularly, who am I when I'm at my brilliant best? And if my career going forward was to be an outlet for that, beginning to think about your career and your work as an outlet for self-expression, that is a game-changing shift right there. And what will quite often happen is there will be certain assumptions or limiting beliefs that will be revealed as you explore that. So the example, you asked for an example. One of the examples that comes to mind is a technical emerging leader of an organization, absolutely brilliant guy, who, when we first started working together in the context of a talent development program, was thinking that in order to progress further in his career, he was going to have to wrap his head around all of that people stuff, right? And I could tell by the way he said it, it was like, ugh, right? And his actual passion and his real zone of genius was systemic thinking, joining the dots. He was like this amazing internal architect of ideas and concepts and possibilities and strategies. And so the work that we did was actually around making that authentic talent and predisposition the centerpiece of his career going forward, so that he could lead on that rather than buying into the idea that leadership is only about leadership of large numbers of people. And that was a few years ago that I was working with him. And what's been fabulous to see since is that he absolutely did that. He's now the director of digital transformation for his organization. He's progressed massively in his career. He absolutely loves what he does. And what's fascinating about that example is that director of digital transformation didn't even exist as a job at the point a few years ago that we were talking about. So I think not only can this self-discovery piece have a profound impact on somebody's trajectory, but it has longevity to it. Because if you really get foundational about who you are at your core, your character, your values, your motivations, your authentic talents and strengths, that stuff has longevity. It evolves, but it doesn't tend to change dramatically over time. And it can be the basis of a lifelong adventure.
Yeah, I love that. And I want to get a little bit granular because I'm really interested to learn how you're doing that. So when you're talking to your clients, what are you actually listening for? How are you using this information to gain clarity and direction for your clients? What sort of things are you listening out for?
Well, I think in big picture terms, I am listening for exactly what we've been talking about so far. I'm listening for authentic character traits. Who is this person when they are being themselves, when they are not twisting themselves up like a pretzel, trying to be what good looks like according to some, idea that's been shared with them along the way. Who are they when they're being their brilliant best? And so that's character traits. Is in terms of the content of our conversation, values are often leaked as words that come round on a loop. If somebody keeps talking about excellence and quality and excellence and quality, then you know that they've got some kind of value in the arena of excellence and quality, or it might be a passion for rigor or something like that. So we all leak our values. They come round in a loop, which I think is really reassuring as a coach, because you don't have to worry about what if I miss something important. If it is really important, it will keep coming round on a loop. And so it's more about pattern spotting, I think. But I think the other thing that I really look for and listen for is not just the content of what's shared with me by the client, but also things like the way their voice and their energy shifts. So some of these vocal markers, like which words do they mark out with particular emphasis? Where do they pause? And you see them just drop into really thinking and feeling their way into something. I love to notice where their pace might pick up and they're suddenly boom, 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 really all comes flooding out. And when they slow right down and become more reflective. So I think there's as much in the process of how somebody shares what they share that's really fascinating and that we can reflect back and highlight to our clients as there is anything about the content of what they share.
I love that. And so much of that is going on unconsciously, isn't it? As a skilled coach, that unconscious competence, if you like, we're doing that really without seeing the moving parts, but we're perceiving the information, aren't we? And sort of appraising the situation. And I like the way you talked about energy. You often see that in a client, actually, shift in energy.
Yes.
And that is a telltale sign, isn't it? Particularly if you're talking about career options. And there might be 3 or 4 career options that you're talking about. They've done some work to appraise these options. And you can see that the option that is the one that is bringing them to life, the energy really shifts, doesn't it? So
that's exactly it. And, that can be absolutely a fascinating process. I mean, fortunately now, even when we're not in the room, we can be on the Zoom or a Teams call or whatever. So we still get that visual input, but it's still there even when you're just on a phone call. If all you've got is audio, because you can listen for a sigh, right? A release of breath and go, and then just say, what was that? What just happened there, and because it's unconscious, as you've just said, Mark, then the client usually won't immediately know. They have to kind of go inside a little bit and find out what they were just thinking or feeling that led to that sort of shift, if you like. I also think that it's wonderful because we've got the visuals usually these days. You can see color shifts on people's faces. You can see their energy rise up. And they're especially with women, I find with my female clients that there is something about when they come authentically alive, that they take up more space. Right? That they are literally expansive and the shoulders go back and their spine straightens. So there's a lot of conditioning, not all of it gender-based, of course, but a lot of conditioning, particularly for women to sort of subliminally to not take up much space, which is why it can sometimes be hard to speak up as a leader, etc. But, I see my female clients particularly mark out that unconscious, expansive thinking where it's as if their whole body is saying yes to a particular option.
Yeah. And sometimes you have to go in and check your understanding to make sure that you're accurate with your understanding and reading of the situation. But I think that's a judgment call, because sometimes it's good to let the flow of the conversation go and actually let that develop organically rather than jumping in and doing too much checking of understanding. It's a balance, isn't it, really, between those two things?
It is, exactly. I think the key metric is what I'm about to ask, if I ask anything at all, is it helpful to my client's understanding? Yes, as a coach, I have to calibrate that we're on the same page, and that's an important thing to do. So at various points in a coaching conversation, it's useful, I believe, to pause and just say, let's check with where we're at. What have we got so far? And what are you thinking right now? And just kind of regroup and sort of gather that together a little bit more consciously. But really, the primary intention is awareness and reflection for the client. And I think that's particularly important in any kind of career coaching, Mark, because quite often the strengths and skills that we are most aware of are the ones that we worked hardest to cultivate, right? So we tend to be very, very consciously aware of the strengths and skills that we've developed through blood, sweat, and tears, right? But we often take largely for granted the things that come easily and enjoyably to us. So if, as a career coach, part of your interest is in helping to set your client up for enjoyable, sustainable success, something where the well-being aspect and the joy along the way is kind of baked into the journey, then it's really important that your client doesn't just kind of skip over and almost throw away the things that are effortless and enjoyable, because that actually could be the transformational point in the conversation. Is what is it that comes easily and enjoyably for you? The work that doesn't feel like work. Now, how about if you were to root your career in that? And that's a whole new conversation quite often.
Certainly is. It is. I use quite a lot of self-assessment tools in my work, particularly around values, skills, interests, for example. I find that if that can be done separately and away from our conversation, it makes the conversation more organic. Do you use self-assessment or assessment tools of any kind, Kate, and where do they fit into your approach?
Well, I think self-assessments used appropriately, can be invaluable. I call them shortcuts to insight. All right. And I think, yes, there's some, shall we say, some consideration required in terms of which tool is the best fit for the job. And also to point out to the client that all of these assessment tools are based in a model, right? They can never describe the wholeness of who you are. And therefore, I believe personally as a coach that the best value from using profiling tools of any kind is to use more than one and then kind of triangulate the results, because I think the greatest value actually emerges when you look at the patterns and themes that emerge across a series of assessments and conversations, right? That's where you really get to these core attributes, talents, strengths, etc., and really key in on the ones that are most authentic. And in relation to that, I would also just say, whenever I invite a client to fill in an assessment, I always go to some lengths to point out that it's a good idea to do that when you're not in work mode, even if our conversation is a career conversation. Because if somebody reflects on, what do I do? Who am I? What are my choices in work? They can inadvertently end up profiling their job description and not their authentic self. So I usually encourage either an evening, a weekend, first thing in the morning before you embark on your working day, shoes kicked off, almost feet on the desk kind of mode. Answer the questions from that relaxed, whole self kind of place, and then the results will actually be most valuable. So my favorite tools are currently, it's shifted over the years, but I'm doing a lot of work around strengths, and particularly tools that highlight authentic strengths that are rooted in in talent, in predisposition. So that might be something like the VIA character strengths survey. It might be strengthsprofile.com, which is a British strengths profiling tool, which is more at the level of core capabilities. There are others people will be familiar with, like the Gallup Strengths Finder and so on. And my long-term favorite, the assessment tool that did it for me way back in my early career as an engineer is, Mark, we both started out in engineering.
Please tell us more. Tell us more. Give us some backstory.
Well, the backstory for me was went back in my early 20s, which is a very long time ago now. I had the chance to do Myers-Briggs. And that was a game-changing experience to me, because I there I was sitting in the corner, communing with my spreadsheets, enjoying some aspects of my work and not others. And then I did this Myers-Briggs profiling tool, and it was talking about my predisposition to want to unleash untapped potential. It was all about communication. It was all about relationship. It was all about possibilities for people and personal growth. So at that time, I was like, it resonated so deeply. I was like, could that be true? That would be amazing if that was true. It was kind of a real experience of awakening. And of course, it entirely explains why I totally ended up where I am right now and why I love my work.
Thank you for that backstory. And it just illustrates, doesn't it, that not only are we, complex individuals, but we change as well during our career, don't we? And so quite often clients we meet do have conflicting choices in their career. That is something that definitely shows up, and they might have different values and goals and conflicts around those. So I wonder how you help clients to prioritize their values and goals and really understand what would be the best for them next, what their best choice would be in their career.
Absolutely. So in my experience, those kinds of conflicts, they show up as resistance of some kind, internal resistance, like I want this, but I can't have it, or I'd love to move forward, but now's not the time, or I don't want to move forward, but I feel like I have to. So there's some kind of, it's like they're trying to drive, but the brakes are on, right? Mm-hmm. There's this internal resistance. So the first thing that I get curious about is, what is the source of that conflict? Is it an external conflict or an internal conflict? If it's external, it might be, I'd like to make a big change, but I probably need a financial cushion behind me because I've got responsibilities. Maybe I've got a mortgage, I've got family, etc., etc. So they're examples of an external conflict, which is of course rooted in an internal values conflict. It's like, I want to provide for my family and I want to have a really rewarding and satisfying career. And it might seem in the moment like I can have one or the other, but I can't have both. And so if it's a pure external conflict situation, then planning is the answer. Even if it's scenario planning, you might not have all of the information yet. There may be uncertainty in the situation as it's unfolding, and you might have to let things play out before you can land which scenario you're actually going to explore and pursue. But if it is an external situation, it's a planning, a thinking through how we can scaffold our clients in exploring their options, identifying favored scenarios, and so on. But if it's internal, then it's not so much a roadblock as an internal barrier, right? Which is usually a barrier of belief, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, I'd love to do that amazing thing, but I'm just not brave enough to do that, or maybe that wouldn't feel like work. And actually, is that okay? Because many of us have been on the receiving end of a lot of conditioning that almost suggests that our work is only valuable if it's hard work, right? You have to hustle and grind, otherwise you're not earning your place. So sometimes there is this kind of internal conflict that says, surely it's not okay for it to be that easy. Or maybe there's a belief that says that I can't really make a living doing that thing that I love. And actually what you need to explore is what form that might take so that they can move forward with the essence of the idea but maybe in a form that does allow them to have a high standard of living if that's important, and so on. So internal conflict, external conflict, identify the source first, and then plan is for external. Integration and collapsing those limiting beliefs is the way forward, in my experience, for internal conflicts.
Yeah, because our clients bring into the coaching a lot of beliefs, or the baggage that they've got, and as you've outlined, that gets in the way really of them moving forward sometimes, doesn't it? So you have to deal with those issues, because it is very difficult to support a client to make change if there are things that are preventing them from stepping into that new world, that new career, a new life for themselves.
Yeah. And even if it doesn't prevent them, it will suck the joy out of it. Right. So if somebody's got those brakes on, if they've got that internal resistance, particularly in place, and they go ahead anyway, they just override that and they just go ahead anyway, then even if they're successful, they will have sucked the joy out of the experience, which I think is a shame, So that's why I always try to take care of that resistance up front.
Yeah. I think with career change, I think also there can be other people that actually influence the change as well. So partners, family members. I had a client actually whose a grandmother was particularly proud of the profession that this person was going with. And that really prevented him from moving away, because he didn't want to let his grandparent down, that, he was doing this thing that she was really proud of. And it wasn't until actually he sat down and had a conversation and he explained, look, I'm miserable in this particular role I've got, this career. I want to, move past this. That, he realized that grandma was quite happy for that to happen. She was just expressing pride in the profession. So often we can get stuck on things that seemingly big blocks that actually can be moved away with a simple conversation, can't we?
Exactly. And, one of the interesting things to explore with our clients can be actually, why is that objection? Because it might be grandma who's super proud. It might be a partner or loved one who is worried about what that transition might bring financially, or in terms of the new circles they'll move in, more travel, those kinds of issues. But actually, that will only hold us back if it speaks to a fear that we ourselves already have. Okay, so if grandma's kind of pride in that situation is actually also that individual is thinking, gosh, I've invested so much of my time and energy. I did my degree, I did all of that professional training and accreditation and so on, and now I'm thinking of just walking away from it. Quite often what we perceive as being something that's coming in from the outside, the reason why it holds us back is because it speaks to our own fears. Mm-hmm. And that can be interesting to explore, because actually when you look at that, it usually doesn't hold water. You obviously did a great job with your client there, Mark, of helping them, facilitating them in exploring, actually, was that a real issue? And at the end of the day, of course, what both that individual and grandma wanted was for that individual to be happy, successful, enjoy their work, make a good living, all of that good stuff that we all want for the people we care about.
Absolutely. Some of the best clients that we have are the ones that have, if you think about the metaphor of a sailboat, they're the ones that have got wind in the sails. They come with plenty of motivation, enthusiasm, turn up on time at the coaching sessions, and they really sort of buy into the whole work that goes on with a client and a coach. But occasionally we meet clients that don't have an awful lot of motivation, and that can be a challenge, can't it? So how do you deal with clients that don't have much motivation? I mean, quite often this isn't those that are paying for themselves, by the way. Quite often they are motivated, but we don't always work with clients that are paying for coaching themselves. And some of these people are not very motivated, are they? How do we support them to move forward?
Well, I'm going to be honest and say that these days, I often just won't take a commission if I don't think the person is engaged, because it's just not in alignment with my values to take money from an organization for somebody who's just not up for the experience. I might be willing to spend a session or two exploring if there really is something there for them. But if they're there because somebody else told them to be, and they're just biding their time, then that's not a good use of my time and energy. And as I say, I won't bill for that. Okay. But quite often, in terms of the motivations, it's when somebody feels unmotivated. My view is that is an unnatural state. It's a sign of internal resistance. It's a sign of the brakes being on. And so an exploration of what's actually holding that motivation, that enthusiasm in check, is a really fascinating conversation to have. So a couple of quick examples of that. If it's early career, and I most often work with emerging leaders of an organization. So if it's relatively early to mid-career, then the lack of motivation might be a reflection of how overwhelmed that person is. Like, they've got a ton of work to do. They're exceptionally busy, but none of that is plugged into what they personally feel is meaningful and important and valuable. Even if the organization is valuing it, it's just not in alignment with their own values. And that's where a piece of work around values elicitation, exploration, looking at where there are values conflicts and so on, can be absolutely invaluable, because then they can shift to make an even greater contribution for their organization, enjoyably and meaningfully. So when you make a shift of that kind, everybody wins. But the other example that I've seen of that over the years, particularly with exec clients who are later in their career, perhaps just with a few years of their career remaining, is that there are just some underlying beliefs about that final phase that are extraordinarily unhelpful. Like, I'm going to be somehow sidelined. I'm going to end up living out my days in this role as a bit of a lame duck while somebody else comes along and sort of takes it all on, and so on. So it's actually just a painful story that has kept the person demotivated. And so in that later career coaching phase, it can be fascinating to explore the idea of legacy and what it would mean to the client to leave a profound legacy. If they were, over that last couple of years, to shift something before they move on, what would that be? And depending on the individual, that might be something systemic. It might be, a profound internal or organizational shift they'd like to help to create before they go. But it might actually be something like mentoring and bringing through the next generation of leaders and so on. So I've had the privilege of working with people who at the start of our conversations were really, as they would say, not demotivated, but have lost their mojo. That's usually how it comes out. I feel like I've kind of gone off the boil. I've lost my mojo. Whereas in actual fact, when you do connect to that authentic inspiration, not motivation, but inspiration, then wild horses can't stop them.
I'm so glad you mentioned those that lose the mojo. That is one of the things that I spend a lot of time speaking to people in mid-career that have lost the mojo. It's a big issue. I think people lose the will to continue on in a role and really, just suffer the end of a career, which is needless, really. If they get support, they can move beyond that. So I'm really glad you've mentioned those important points, Kate.
Fantastic.
Well, speaking to you, it's so obvious you've got a highly personalized coaching approach, like we all do. We develop these over time, and they're all unique to ourselves, of course, aren't they? Your style, I'm suggesting maybe, I've read your book, Get There, Love Here, The Busy Professional's Guide to Authentic, Enjoyable Success. I've read the book. I really enjoyed the book. I've recommended it to a few people as well. Does this summarize your coaching approach? Is this you, the Kate Trafford, the coach? Does this summarize your approach?
Well, thank you for your kind words, Mark. And what I would say is the process of writing the book was absolutely fascinating, and it took me a lot longer than I ever imagined it would. And that's because of exactly what you've just said. I think I could have written a coaching book, and my book isn't aimed at coaches directly, although there's a whole host of power questions in there that career coaches might find really, really helpful, not just for themselves, but working with their clients. But it was for me, I could have written a book that would have been useful. And I could perhaps have done that quite quickly. But once I got into the process, there was this experience of, no, but what am I really aware of based on my 20 odd years of practice? What am I really aware makes the biggest difference? How do people get stuck? What are the common patterns and themes? What are the questions that I almost invariably ask? And I didn't have conscious awareness of any of that when I started writing the book. So for me, there was this process of revelation and trying to move beyond writing a book to writing the book I was most excited and passionate to write. And during that writing period, finding the interplay between my writing and my coaching. So I would be writing in the morning, and an insight or a thought or an aha would come through, and then it would play into my coaching session in the afternoon. And then maybe something would happen in a coaching session, and I'd go, oh my gosh, I can't believe I missed that. That needs to be in the book. And there was just this beautiful unfolding, this synergy between the two. So where I landed with the book, to answer your direct question, is that all of my work in that book? No, it would have been thousands of pages long if I had, and I had a word limit I had to work to. But it is, in the process of writing the book, a framework emerged, which is a very authentic reflection of how I approach my coaching work. And so yes, it is a reflection of an aspect of what I'm most passionate about in my coaching work, setting people up for authentic, enjoyable success.
Well, you've done a great job writing the book, and I think it's an excellent book. So well done.
Thank you.
So I want to be respectful of your time, Kate, and we have got one final question. This is: what advice would you give to career coaches to help them consistently deliver impactful results for their clients?
Well, I think the key is to maintain your growth mindset as a coach. That for me is the absolute key. I'm very aware that every time I sit down with a client, they are effectively agreeing to go into unknown territory, uncharted territory. And that takes a certain amount of courage. They are at their edge of their understanding, and in some conversations well beyond it. And so in a way, I feel a kind of moral obligation to make sure that I'm at my edge and occasionally beyond it as well. And I think what happens if you're willing to do that, Mark, if you're willing to not just talk about, living life to the full, being courageous, being experimental in your approach, but actually to model that, to live that in front of them as a coach, then there's an extra layer, an extra level of impact that comes from the work that you do together. So it really is about thinking about what it means to you as a coach to be open, to be experimental, to be willing to give things a whirl, to, if something doesn't quite work out the way you'd hope, to learn from it and feed it forward in the future. And in that way, we're showing up as our most authentic selves as we encourage our clients to do exactly the same.
I love that. The growth of the coach, that's so powerful. And it just really is, it just communicates what we're talking about here. It's about helping career coaches to become better, to have aspirations, to be even more effective as a career coach. So thank you so much for those words, Kate.
Thank you.
And it's been a pleasure to talk to you today. You've added so many new insights for all coaches, not just career coaches listening in. Where can listeners contact you, Kate?
Well, my favorite place to hang out in the social media world is LinkedIn. So if people would love to connect, I would love that too. Kate Trafford on LinkedIn. That's my playground. And I'd love to hear from people who would welcome a connection.
Brilliant. And where can they learn more about your book, Get Their Love Here?
So Get There, Love Here is available on Amazon, and the first chapter is available to read for free as well, using the little look inside feature. So as I say, I hope people will at least just take a quick look at it if they're interested, if they found value from this call, because it might not only be thought-provoking for them and insightful for them, but also give them a whole new raft of power questions and inquiry questions to explore with their clients as well.
Yeah, and I highly recommend they do that. I think it's a great book. So to wrap up, and in summary, we learned that effective coaching involves understanding our clients better. This means getting to know their values, goals, and motivations. While questionnaires, self-assessments, and client discussions are useful, some of the best insights, those aha moments you mentioned, Kate, come from making space for discovery and actively listening to our clients. By truly understanding our clients, we can help them make informed decisions about their careers and lives. Kate Trafford, once again, thanks so much for taking time out to talk to me today.
Been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to another podcast by the Association for Coaching. For 20 years, our purpose has been to inspire and champion coaching excellence, advance the coaching profession, and make a sustainable difference to individuals, organisations, and society. To find out more about the AC and our member benefits, follow us on LinkedIn or explore our webpage at associationforcoaching.com. There you can keep up to date with our latest podcast episodes, enjoy the wealth of digital learning offerings, and gain insight from our Coaching Perspectives magazine.